Hello everyone. Today we will going to discuss about visual reflexes. Specific learning objectives of today's lecture are to know about autonomic innervation of eye, to know about accommodation reflex, to know about pupillary light reflex, and to know about Horner syndrome. So first we discuss autonomic innervation of the eye. So the eye is innervated by both parasympathetic and sympathetic nerve fibers. The parasympathetic preganglionic fiber arises in Edinger-Westphal nucleus, which is also known as the visceral nucleus portions of third cranial nerve or oculomotor nerve, and then passes in third nerve to ciliary ganglion, which is known as the preganglionic fiber, and from ciliary ganglion the postganglionic fiber arises. Okay, and ciliary ganglion is situated immediately behind the eye. As you can see in this figure, that this one is Edinger-Westphal nucleus, which is known as the visceral nucleus of third cranial nerve, from which the preganglionic parasympathetic fiber arises and it terminated in ciliary ganglion. This is the ciliary ganglion, which is situated just posterior to the eyeball. From here the postganglionic parasympathetic fiber arises and it supply to the circular muscle or the sphincter muscle of the iris, as well as it supply the ciliary muscles. Okay. So this is about the parasympathetic innervation. Now the sympathetic innervation of the eye. The sympathetic innervation of the eye originate in the intermediolateral horn cells of the first thoracic segment of the spinal cord, and from there the sympathetic fiber enter the sympathetic chain and passes upward to the superior cervical ganglion, and where they synapse with the postganglionic fiber. So here this one is the spinal cord. From here the intermediolateral horn of upper thoracic segment, the preganglionic sympathetic fiber arise, which run and pass into sympathetic ganglionic chain, and it is synapse with the postganglionic fiber in the superior cervical ganglion. The postganglionic fiber then run along with the carotid artery and it branches, and ultimately through the arterial branches it reach up to the eye, and in the eye it supply the radial muscle of the iris. So this is about the sympathetic and parasympathetic innervation of the eye. Now control of pupillary diameter. So stimulation of parasympathetic nerve also excites the pupillary sphincter muscle, thereby decreasing the pupillary aperture. This process is called miosis. So miosis means constriction of the pupil, because whenever we stimulate the parasympathetic nerve to the eye, it causes the contraction of sphincter pupillae or pupillary sphincter muscles, which mainly causing the constriction of the pupil, which is known as miosis. Conversely, stimulation of sympathetic nerve excites the radial fiber of the iris and causes the pupillary dilation, which is called mydriasis. So opposite to the parasympathetic, the sympathetic stimulation, it stimulates the radial fiber, and when the radial fiber contract, it causes the dilation of the pupil, which is known as the mydriasis. So parasympathetic stimulation causes the constriction of the pupil or miosis, and sympathetic stimulation causes dilation of the pupil or mydriasis. Now control of accommodation or focusing the eye. So this accommodation we had already discussed in previously also in previous lectures. I think lecture number 1 or 2 we had already discussed about the accommodation. Today we will discuss the reflex mechanism behind this accommodation. Okay, so the accommodation is the changes or change in the curvature of the lens when we focus on the near object. From the far object, when we try to see the near object, at that time the curvature of the lens increases. So this change in the curvature is known as the accommodation to focus the light rays, diverging light rays which are coming from the near object. To focus on that light rays on retina, the changes should be occur in the curvature of the lens, and that process is known as accommodation. So how this is materialize, or how this mechanism act, that we will going to discuss today. Okay, so the accommodation mechanism, that is the mechanism that focuses the lens system of the eye, is essential for a high degree of visual acuity. So to particularly to see the near object, accommodation of lens is regulated by a negative feedback mechanism that automatically adjusts the refractive power of lens to achieve the highest degree of visual acuity. Now refractive power of the lens is increases as the curvature of the lens increases, and refractory power is 1 divided by focal length. So if we decreases the focal length, the refractive power increases. Okay, so that is mainly to increase the visual acuity for near vision. And accommodation is mainly involves the three process. One is the constriction of the pupil, another is the accommodation reflex itself, and third one is the convergence of the eyeball. Okay, so it involves the two things. One is the constriction of the pupil, second is accommodation reflex itself, it means which is mainly to increase the curvature of the lens, and third is the convergence of the both the eye. Okay, so the both the eye, they medially rotate, that is known as the convergence. Now the accommodation changes, you can see in this figure that this is before accommodation, the lens is somewhat flat because of this suspensory ligament or zonular fiber of suspensory ligament, which keeps the lens tense, and because of this tension the interior surface of the lens is almost flat. Okay, and this zonular fiber is attached with ciliary muscles. These are the ciliary muscles. This or ciliary body, this is zonular fiber of suspensory ligament which is attached with the lens, and before accommodation, it means when we are seeing the far object, at that time this surface is flat. Now because of the accommodation mechanism, there is a because of the signals which is coming to this ciliary muscle, there is a contraction of ciliary muscle, particularly the circular ciliary muscle contract, and this drag this ciliary body towards the cornea. Okay, and that's why this tension on suspensory ligamental fiber is loosened. Okay, and when the tension on both of this suspensory ligamental fiber is loose, there will be a increase in curvature of interior surface of the lens. So you can compare the lens of before accommodation and after accommodation. The interior surface of the lens, the bulges out, and because of this the refractive power of lenses increases, and it helps to focus the diverging light rays which are coming from the near object on the retina. Now Perkin-Sampson image. So this accommodation, we can observe this accommodation with the help of one experiment which is known as the Perkin-Sampson image. In this, when a lighted candle is held in front of subject's eye, three images called the Perkin-Sampson image can be seen in the reflection, two upright and one inverted. Now see this figure. When we keep the one candle in front of the eye at some distance, not the near but at some distance before accommodation, we will see three candle, two upright and one inverted. Okay, so this two upright images, one is large image, another is smaller one. Okay, so this larger one is actually imping on anterior surface of the lens. This smaller upright is because of the cornea, on the corneal surface, and this is on the posterior surface of the lens. Okay, so this one is on the interior surface of the lens, this one on the surface of the cornea, and this one on the posterior surface of the lens. Now after accommodation there will be a change in the size of this image on the anterior surface of the lens. It becomes small compared to this image. This image on the anterior surface of the lens becomes small while other two image remain same. So it suggests that during accommodation there is only a change in the anterior surface of the lens. There will be no any change in the corneal surface or the posterior surface of the lens. Okay, change only occur at the anterior surface of the lens, and that's why the candle or the image become small. Okay, so this image is known as Purkinje-Shenson image. So as we had discussed that two upright and one inverted image is formed, the smaller of the two upright image is reflected from the cornea and the larger image is reflected from the anterior surface of the lens, and the inverted image is reflected from the posterior surface of the lens. The inverted image, which is faint and small, is formed by the reflection from posterior surface of the lens. The image from at the anterior surface of the lens becomes smaller with accommodation, while the other two images show no changes with the accommodation. So this is known as the Purkinje-Shenson image. Now another similar Purkinje word come in the Purkinje shift. This may ask sometimes in the viva or in the form of short note. Okay. So what is Purkinje shift? The Purkinje shift is the difference in the luminosity of color in lights of different intensity. Now we have already discussed that there are two type of vision. The photopic vision, it means vision in the bright light, which is mainly attributed to cone, or cones are mainly responsible for photopic vision, and another is the scotopic vision, that is a vision in dim light. Okay, so that is mainly attributed to rods, or rods are mainly responsible for scotopic vision. So this difference in luminosity of color in the light of different intensity, that is known as Purkinje shift. Now how this photopic vision and scotopic vision they affect the color? So in one experiment it is seen that at the dusk, it means at the dusk the lights are dim. Okay, at the dusk when we visualize the blue flower, okay, any flower which having a blue color, it appear as a very much glow. Okay, while if we visualize the red flower at the dusk, it appear as a black. So blue flowers luminosity will increase at the dusk, while the red flowers luminosity will decrease, instead it appear as a black. Okay, so blue flower glows at the dusk while the red flowers appear black. This type of reasoning question may be asked. Okay, so the reason is because of the difference in the spectral sensitivity of rods and cones. Now peak retinal sensitivity of the cone is equidistance from the rod peak sensitivity, red color peak sensitivity and blue color peak sensitivity for cones. Okay, so in the bright light, this same blue color flower appear as a blue. It means it having a same luminosity. Okay, because of the photopic reason, because its spectral sensitivity of this blue color is same distance, equidistance from blue and red color, while the peak sensitivity of rods, they are near to the blue colors. At the dusk or in the dim light, the peak rod sensitivity, because in the dim light the rods are mainly responsible, or rods are mainly active, while in the daylight the cones are mainly active. In the bright light the cones are more active, in the dim light rods are more active. So the sensitivity is rod is more near the blue, so blue color is more brightly visualized. So that's why the blue flower is more easily visualized, or blue flower is glow, while the red color is very far from the peak retinal sensitivity of rod. So the red color they cannot visualize properly, instead they appear as a black, okay, in the dim light or during the scotopic vision. So this difference in the luminosity of color in light, it is known as the Perkins shift. Okay, it occurs due to difference between rods and cones in their peak spectral sensitivity, which is blue green color for rods and green yellow color for cones. So you can see here that the peak sensitivity of rod is around at the wavelength of 500 nanometer, and here it is at the peak retinal sensitivity of cone is around 560 nanometer, that is equidistance from blue and red color, while here it is more near to blue color. So in dim light, in scotopic vision, the blue flower appear glow while the red flower appear black. So this is about Perkins shift. Now the accommodation reflex or near reflex. What is the mechanism or the pathway for the accommodation reflex or near reflex? So when we focus on the near point, okay, the light rays, they focus on the retina, then through the visual pathway the signals is reach up to the visual cortex. Now from visual cortex through long association fiber, visual cortex is situated in occipital lobe. So through association fiber the signal is come to the frontal lobe in the frontal eye field. Okay, and from the frontal eye field the fibers come to the pretectal nucleus. Okay, and from there into Edinger-Westphal nucleus, and from Edinger-Westphal nucleus it goes into the ciliary ganglion, and then into the ciliary muscles as well as muscle of iris. Okay, so both this thing increase the curvature of the lens as well as it causes the constriction of the pupil. Okay, so this is about the accommodation reflex. Okay, and simultaneously it also causes the convergence of the lens by stimulating the oculomotor nuclei. So because of the stimulation of oculomotor nuclei, it also causes the medial rotation of the eyeball. Okay, so this is about the accommodation reflex, and because the fiber from each eye goes half towards the other side and half towards the same side, so both half of the this visual cortex is going to stimulated, and that's why the response occur in both the eye. Okay, so this is about the accommodation reflex or near reflex, that the afferent fiber is goes through the optic nerve up to the primary visual cortex. From there the long association fiber, they come to the frontal eye field, from frontal eye field to the third cranial nerve nuclei, and from third cranial nerve nuclei to the eye. Okay, so this is about the accommodation reflexes. Now the light reflexes. When we imping a light on a any single eye, or then there the response is constriction of the pupil on that same eye, that is known as the direct light reflex. But simultaneously the opposite eye also shows the constriction of the pupil, that is known as the consensual light reflex, or it is also sometimes known as the indirect light reflex. Okay, so when we imping a light on a single eye, so the constriction of pupil occur in that eye, that is direct light reflex. Simultaneously the constriction also occur on opposite eye, that is known as the consensual or indirect light reflex. So now we see the pathway for this light reflex. So same way this light focus on the retina, from retina the signal is going up to the lateral geniculate body, and from there the signals they goes to the pretectal nuclei. From pretectal nuclei it goes, fiber goes to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus of both the side. Okay, and same way, because the half of the fiber is coming on the ipsilateral side and half goes to the opposite side, so both side of the pretectal nuclei they are stimulated, and they also stimulated both side of the third cranial nerve nuclei. As you can see here that this green fiber is stimulating this nuclei as well as opposite side nuclei, and same way the red fiber is stimulating the both the side of nuclei. Okay, so this thing you can visualize here. Okay, so say that's why the third efferent fiber of the third cranial nerve of both the side they are stimulated, and that's why when the constriction is occur on the same side as well as on the opposite side. So that is the mainly the pathway for direct as well as consensual or indirect light reflex, because the this fiber from pretectal nuclei they stimulate both the side of third nerve nuclei as well as the fiber from retina. They are half of the fiber goes to the opposite side and half of goes to the same side. So both side of the pretectal nuclei are stimulated as well as both side of Edinger-Westphal nucleus or visceral nucleus of third cranial nerve are stimulated, and that's why the response occur in both the eye. Even if we are stimulating only one eye or impinging the light on one eye, the constriction of the pupil occur on both the eye. So that is about the direct light reflex and consensual or indirect light reflex. Now one clinical condition which is known as Argyll-Robertson pupil. Now if you have compare both this accommodation reflex and the light reflex, so in both of them the efferent pathway are almost same, that they are coming from Edinger-Westphal nucleus to the ciliary ganglion to the eye muscles. Okay, so this efferent pathway of light reflex is actually running dorsal to the pathway of accommodation. The efferent pathway of light reflex is dorsal to the pathway for accommodation reflex. Efferent pathway means pathway from Edinger-Westphal nucleus to ciliary ganglion. These fibers, okay, they are same for both the light reflex as well as from accommodation reflexes. You can see that from third cranial nerve nuclei, the postganglionic fiber they are same. This one is for accommodation reflex, this one is for light reflex. Okay, but the fiber of light reflex they are more dorsal compared to the accommodation reflex. So that's why the pathway of light reflex is more prone to damage compared to the pathway of accommodation reflex. So in some particular condition the pupil constrict in accommodation reflex but not in the light reflex, and is that condition is known as Argyll-Robertson pupil. So in some condition the pupil is constricted or give response to accommodation reflex, but they fails to give response to light reflex, and that is known as Argyll-Robertson pupil, ARP. You can remember the mnemonics. ARP means accommodation reflex present. Okay, this is just the mnemonics. Okay, actually the full form of ARP is Argyll-Robertson pupil, but you can remember in that way that accommodation reflex is present, it means the light reflex is lost. So loss of light reflex with intact accommodation reflex is seen in Argyll-Robertson pupil. Okay, and this is mainly occur in neurosyphilis. The syphilis is one of the disease which is actually it is sexually transmitted disease, and sometimes it affect the CNS. Okay, so in CNS syphilis this Argyll-Robertson pupil is one of the sign. Okay, so this is about the Argyll-Robertson pupil. One more clinical condition about this autonomic innervation of the eye is Horner syndrome. The sympathetic nerve to the eye are occasionally interrupted or damaged. So damage to the sympathetic nerve to the eye leads to Horner syndrome. The interruption frequently occur in the cervical sympathetic chain, which causes the clinical condition called the Horner syndrome. And clinical features of syndrome are ptosis, it means drooping of upper eyelid; miosis, it means constriction of pupil; anhidrosis, it means loss of sweating; and enophthalmos, it means the size of eyeball decreases. Okay. Now first we see the ptosis. Ptosis means drooping of upper eyelid. Now this drooping of upper eyelid in the case of damage to the sympathetic nerve is mainly because of a paralysis of tarsal muscles. The tarsal muscles they are accessory muscles which are present in the upper eyelid, which actually helps the levator palpebris superioris to elevate the eyelid. Okay, so when these accessory muscles are damaged, it looks like that the eyelid are halfly closed, and that is known as the ptosis. Okay, meiosis, you are very well aware that it is known as constriction of the pupil. The normal pupil is pupillary size is maintained because of the balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic innervation. So sympathetic innervation, they supply the radial muscle which try to keep the pupil open or increase the pupillary aperture, or parasympathetic stimulation, they try to keep the pupil constricted. Okay, so when the sympathetic is damaged, the parasympathetic become more dominant and it leads to constriction of the pupil, which is known as meiosis. The anhidrosis or loss of sweating, because sweat glands, they are supplied by sympathetic nerve fiber. So when the this nerve fiber is damaged, the half of the face, they surface the anhidrosis or loss of sweating. And enophthalmos means small eyeball. It is actually, we can say it is a pseudo enophthalmos. It gives the appearance of the one eyeball is smaller than the other, but it is not actually the decrease in the eyeball size, but the reason is the ptosis. Because of the half closure of the eye, the affected eye appears smaller. Okay, so that's why we call them a enophthalmos, or decrease in the size of the eyeball or smaller eye. Okay, so this all are the clinical features of Horner syndrome. So with this we here completed the visual reflexes. Thank you.